From The National, this is Trending Middle East. It's Tuesday, July 8th. Here are today's headlines. U.S. Special Envoy Thomas Barrack said he was satisfied with Lebanon's response to a U.S. call for Hezbollah to disarm.
What the government gave us was something spectacular. In a very short period of time, in a very complicated manner, I'm unbelievably satisfied with the response.
Barrack made his remarks in Beirut on Monday after Lebanon's 7-page response to the U.S. proposal.
Now what it takes is a parry and thrust to the details, which we're going to do. We're both committed to get to the details and get a resolution.
His visit comes as the U.S. steps up pressure on Hezbollah and Israeli strikes on Lebanon persist. That's despite a ceasefire in November that brought 14 months of war with Israel to an end.
Implementing the roadmap is not so easy because that requires agreement within Lebanon's leadership and with Hezbollah.
The National's Homsi reports from Beirut.
Lebanon is at a new phase of political existence because for the first time in a long time, it's not caught between competing foreign proxies with the U.S. and its allies on one side, Iran and its allies on the other. So Lebanese leaders recognize this as a joint pressure campaign for Lebanon to agree to the U.S. roadmap. But they say pressure can't work on Hezbollah as long as Israeli attacks and occupation continue. And in fact, it might make things worse.
Barrack said the agreement was necessary due to the unsuccessful ceasefire mechanism adopted between Israel, Hezbollah, and the Lebanese army. Hezbollah suffered devastating losses in its war with Israel. The ceasefire called for Hezbollah to begin disarming south of the Litani River in exchange for an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanese territory. While Hezbollah has cooperated with Lebanese authorities, Israeli strikes on Lebanese soil have continued. Israel also maintains a military occupation of 5 points along the border with Lebanon.
Lebanese leaders are also themselves keen to restore their monopoly on weapons in the country for sovereign reasons. They want to see the Lebanese army be the sole proprietor of weapons and the sole military force. So it is, of course, also in their own best interest.
The U.S.-backed diplomatic roadmap ties Hezbollah's nationwide disarmament to funding for reconstruction of Lebanon and an end to Israeli military operations in the country.
Now, Hezbollah has been politically silent on the issue, but its leader, Naim Qassem, said last week that Hezbollah would not capitulate to pressure and that it was ready for either peace or confrontation.
Yemen's Houthi rebels say they've retaliated after an Israeli strike. The group said it carried out a military operation using 3 missiles and 8 drones against targets in Israel. Early on Monday, the Israeli military said it struck Houthi targets at 3 Yemeni ports and a power plant. It was the first attack on Yemen in nearly a month. Here's the National's Thomas Helm with more from Jerusalem.
Israel's already hit many of the targets that it struck on Sunday, places like the Hodeidah port, since the fighting between both sides erupted. Things like fuel depots and other infrastructure that Israel says is important to the Houthis' military campaigns. Although it's important to note that many of these ports and facilities also have civilian functions. This has led quite a few people to wonder exactly what the purpose of these attacks are.
Israel has carried out several strikes in Yemen over recent months in response to missile attacks by the Houthis. The Houthis have been launching missiles and drones at Israel since the Gaza war broke out in October 2023. They say they're acting in solidarity with the Palestinians.
The Houthis show quite striking resilience in the face of these major attacks, which often involve dozens of military aircraft and very sophisticated long-distance operations with many dozens of munition. I spoke to one Israeli security expert who was quite frank about the fact that Israel keeps hitting the same places. He said it wasn't so much to decisively cripple the Houthi military operations, but much more to send a message to Israel's regional adversaries further afield, in particular Iran, that Israel will not tolerate even a single missile strike or effort to harm it.
Leaders of Brics condemned U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran and called for an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. The Brics group of developing nations, named for its founding members, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, began a summit in Brazil on Sunday. In a statement released on Sunday night, Brics leaders agreed to denounce military strikes against Iran, which is also a Brics member. The language is part of a broader call for global multilateral institutions, including the UN Security Council, to promote peaceful resolutions to continuing military conflicts in the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump said the U.S. would impose an additional 10% tariff on any countries, quote-unquote, aligning themselves with the, quote, anti-American policies, unquote, of the Brics group. That's as Trump says he's finalizing new tariffs set to take effect in August.
Sending letters out on Monday having to do with the trade deals. It could be 12, maybe 15. Secretary of Commerce right here. And I guess, Howard, I would say it could be maybe as many as 15 or so. And they'll be going.
Brics leaders also, quote, expressed alarm, unquote, at what they called a critical increase in global military spending. That's another clash with Trump's demand that NATO countries raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. That's all for this morning's headlines. You can get these stories and follow live updates at our site. And before you go, we want to hear from you. Help us tailor our podcast offerings to you by filling out our survey at our site or in the show notes of this episode. Yasmin Altaji, The National.